Good morning and welcome to my second installment. The first one, I broke it up into two, so technically, this is my second story time. My story time series I am calling Adventures of a New York City Girl Expat, where I share some stories of my experiences living in Aix-en-Provence prior to meeting my husband. So, I thought about what I wanted to talk about today. I've got a list of stories. I'm trying to keep them in a logical order, okay, so that they make sense. Now, at the time, I would say about a year into my living in Aix-en-Provence, I befriended, or I was befriended by another American expat, and she's been the perfect friend. Had a lot in common and personality wise, whatever. So as we got to know each other, it turned out that but our experiences arriving in Aix-en-Provence were very different. I came to Aix-en-Provence for university. I came to study at the university, and while I had a significant amount of support getting established here from a friend, and as I explained in the prior video, it's very different when your support is your partner. So for her, she met her then fiance. She met her future husband while they were both studying at the same university in the States. They got engaged. She followed him back here, and he is a national. So he has family here, not just here in France, but in Aix-en-Provence. And Aix-en-Provence is a very peculiar environment in that it's very affluent. There's a lot of wealth. I mean, there's a mix of incomes and things, but Aix-en-Provence tends to attract a more upscale group of people. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot of students, a lot of international students, a lot of young urban professionals, upwardly mobile professionals. So I'll leave it at that. So she followed her husband here, or she followed her fiance here, and they got married. And as we became very good friends, she became very supportive and helpful about my helping me navigate this landscape. On top of that, at the time, she was working for a very high end nuclear energy company, and she worked in human resources, so she was very helpful with my structuring certain my CVs and things of that nature. Now, it was interesting because one day we were having wine, and she said to me, and again, she had a very different experience coming here as an expat because her husband was a local. And again, it's very different when your partner is your support system because you're around them 24/7, or you're around them most of the time. Very different for me. I was a single woman pretty much figuring it out pretty much on my own. And she said to me, because of her experience, she said to me, in order to advance your French, I think it's a good idea for you to get a boyfriend. Boyfriend? I'm a little bit too old for a boyfriend. I'm not 16, not interested, quite frankly. And at the time, I was teaching, I was an ESL teacher. And as you might imagine, much like in the States, teachers go from September to June. So you have the summer off or whatever. So, much like most teachers, I was in between contracts. Here it's all about the contract. So I was in between contracts, and at the same time, I had to find another place to live. So it's back in that same position, which is very common in Aix-en-Provence because they tend to, most proprietors prefer to rent only on the off season. I've been seeing a lot of news coverage about European cities, a number of popular tourist destinations where the local residents are protesting against over tourism and harassing tourists, things of that nature, because the over tourism is making their lives unsustainable. The rents have gone through the roof, and they have to move in order to accommodate the tourists. So I just wanted everyone to know I had the exact same experience in Aix-en-Provence, which was very, very typical. It's very seldom that you find a proprietor who wants to rent to you for the entire year. So let's get that out of the way. So she says to me, oh, I think you should get a boyfriend. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, technically I don't have a job. Technically I don't have a place to live. I really don't think that that is where my focus should be right now. But I understood where she was coming from. And her logic was that you need somebody that you're in communication with on a daily basis. I mean, she and I communicated all the time, but obviously you can imagine it's very different depending on the nature of the relationship. As she said to me, no, you specifically need someone who doesn't speak English. Again, I get it, totally get it, but that was not where my priorities were. So I wound up meeting this older gentleman who did not speak English. And, I felt pretty comfortable with him. He was Tunisian, and he wanted to take me to a Tunisian restaurant in the center of Aix. He lived just up the street from myself, and we met at a local pub where I loved their pizza or whatever, not too far from where I live. So I said, oh, sure. He says to me, oh, let's meet back here Thursday, and, we'll go to this restaurant. I said, oh, okay, sure. It didn't ask to take me to, didn't ask to pick me up in my home or anything like that, which I was a little leery about. So we met up, right? Went out for this Tunisian restaurant, whatever, everything's fine. He was such a gentleman, he knew everybody, and that's another thing. Most of the locals are very, very well acquainted with a lot of proprietors, but you know how it is when you enjoy something, you become well acquainted with staff. So, I felt very comfortable. So we decided to go out again. We went out the second time, and we were at an outside restaurant. We were at an outdoor restaurant. And I was sitting with my back, I was sitting facing the wall. He was sitting facing out toward the street. Now, there was a gentleman next to me who was with his date or whoever he was, and he was smoking. But again, now I am allergic to secondhand smoke, but we were outside, and it's not like the guy was smoking with the hand that was closest to me. He was actually very mindful and very respectful, and he's smoking with the other hand that's further away from me and not close to anybody else that was close to the aisle or whatever. And each time he took a puff, he brought his hand down as if he did not want to disturb anyone. And now, again, I have hot flashes or whatever, and so I brought out my fan. I brought out my hand fan. I've always got a little, handheld fan on me, which I'm surprised I didn't bring it out today. So I took my fan out, and again, always got hot flashes or whatever. And I will admit, it does keep the air, fresh around me. So I got my hand fan. I'm fanning myself a little bit. And my date turns to the guy and says, hey, man, would you put that out? She's asthmatic. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I never told you I was asthmatic, but whatever. Some words were exchanged. I kind of blacked out. Some words were exchanged. Long story short, they literally, words were exchanged, and it escalated to the point that they physically got up and contact was involved. I have no idea, because what happened was I was facing the wall, okay? And once it escalated, I said to myself, I refuse to engage this behavior, okay? I don't know his personality well enough to know if he's just, being a cock or whatever, being a, you know what I mean, getting cocky or whatever. So I'm sitting there, I'm facing the wall, and I'm thinking to myself, I refuse to turn around. But at this point, they had both gotten up and they were behind me because that's where the walkway was. That's where the street was. So they were behind me. And again, I refused to turn around. And I'm watching the woman who is with the other guy who, they're engaged in whatever they're doing in their little combat. And I'm watching her just to kind of get a gauge for if this is something I should be alarmed about or whatever. And her head barely even turned, she was watching it or whatever, but she didn't seem concerned. After a few seconds, they sat back down, and, I'm just kind of like, all right, maybe we could still salvage this, whatever, stay calm, if I'm calm, he'll calm down, whatever. So when the time came to pay the check, right, my date goes inside. At this point, and it was only about 15 minutes after that, my date goes inside to pay the check. And I'm sitting there, and the guy was totally chill or whatever, So we turned. The guy that he was having this fight with, the guy sitting next to me, I turned and I looked at him. He turns and looks at me, and we both said the same thing to each other at the precise moment. Désolé. Excusez-moi, pardon. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I am so sorry. And then, of course, the three of us laugh. Myself, his companion, myself, and he. We start laughing. And even a table next to us, an adjoining table, kind of like, is everything okay? We're at that point, we're all chuckling and, whatever, shooting the breeze like, okay, I don't know what happened. I refused to engage. And I told him, I said, this is only my second time meeting this person. I don't know his temperament or anything like that. So my date, or my companion, I should say, comes out after paying the check. Now everybody's chilled out. We're all relaxed. At this point, we're kind of, laughing and making nice with each other. He comes out, didn't sit down. We're about to leave. I go to grab my bag and say goodnight. And I think I said goodnight. And he shouts, "He's a racist. He's a racist." At that point, okay, now mind you, the guy, my companion, was just a couple of inches shorter than myself. I literally grabbed him by the back of his shirt, and I said, no, it's time to go, vas-y. So, which means let's go. Yeah, after that, I blocked him. And that's all there is to that. Actually, there is more. But stay tuned for part 2 of this one.